Howdy, Beefalo Bart here, and welcome. Alright, I want to kind of get stuck right into this one, and what I've done is just created a blank project, and if you want to kind of follow along, then you may do so. For those who are viewing this, and I'll mention this again later in the stream, because nobody's caught up to it just yet, but if you do wish to make donations, during the live stream, use the link below for the Streamlabs link, and you'll get a nice little notification and let everybody know that, hey, you're awesome and you just made a donation. If you don't want anybody to know, or if you're wanting to donate later, then just use the regular paypal.me link and that'll do it. Alright, today's drink of choice, Pepsi Cherry Vanilla. Alright, so changing things. Let's see. Well, what's the best way to describe that? Okay, so I'm doing 15 things at a time here. I'm going to go ahead and click that, and you can see there's nothing here. There is zero in my project. We don't need anything. We can make our own things, and everything will be awesome. So let's go ahead and add in by add new, add feature content pack, and let's go ahead and put in third person, because why not? So now we have a third person template. I always create my new projects with no starter content and with no nothing. You just start with a blank project, but I also do it in blueprints instead of C++. Why? Because I'm pathetic and this is all I know how to do. So shut up and learn. Alright, so we have third person character and our map here to make sure that it actually lets us walk around and do lovely things. Go to our game mode override and set third person game mode. And now we can hit play and hey look, we have a mouse cursor. I really hate that. Welcome, and there's multiple ways to get rid of that mouse cursor bug. If you don't have it, then shut up. I do. So I love, the fact that I can tell my audience to shut up, and that I mean it lovingly. So we're going to go into our third person character, and the first thing we're going to do is, well, I'm not using a touch input, and if you're not using it, then get rid of it. I'm not using a gamepad, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm not using VR, so I'm getting rid of that. So I'm just streamlining things down to the bare necessities and getting it to where the only things that are in here are things that I'm going to be using. So next thing I want to do is on event begin play. We're going to put a bunch of stuff in here. So just event begin play. Then what we need to do when we start playing, we want to make sure that where our input is set input to, so we're going to set our game mode or our input mode to game only, because that's all we're doing is we're here to play a game when we hit play. So we need to get player controller, because we want to say, hey, the player now needs to be set in game mode only, and we want to set show mouse cursor to false, and I don't want to see all this. I just want to keep this as clean as possible, so I'm going to highlight all three of these really quickly, right click, and I am going to collapse nodes, or I can collapse to a function. So let's actually collapse it to a function. Now it's called new function 0. No, we want to call this game mode only. If we want to, now we have this, we can actually throw this in anytime we want. So this is going to do what we need to do. We're going to compile and save. I'm going to drag this back over here so I can come back to it in just a minute. Now we hit play, no more mouse cursor, we have direct control of our character. Lovely. Okay, so changing things. Well, it's kind of hard to show how to swap guns and stuff like that when I don't have any guns in here and I don't have anything else going on. So in the process of doing so, let's actually, hey, welcome. we want to create something that's going to symbolize, hey, okay, now we're in here and we're doing this function and we're changing the weapon. In this particular case, all I'm going to do is just create an object that we can see that will actually be a stand-in for a weapon. So the first thing we want to do is come up with the concept of what we're going to use. And I'm going to go ahead and make this kind of simple. I'm going to grab a cube and set it in a map. Well, it's kind of big, so let's go to our details panel and let's change this to 0.1 by 0.1 by 0.1. Let's make it 0.2. And then what I want to do here is I want to right click on that cube, and before I do this, I want to go ahead and, I know this is odd, but I create folders for everything. If you haven't noticed that, yeah, okay, anyway. So we're going to make an assets folder, and inside here I'm going to create a new folder called mesh, and this is where we're going to put this new model. We're going to right click on our cube, and we are going to convert cube to static mesh. And I'm going to put this in my assets folder, mesh folder, and we're going to call this cube gun. Doesn't matter that it's not a gun. You get the picture, right? So now we have a new static mesh called cube gun. We can get rid of the one in the map, and now we have a static mesh. Now it did not retain its settings of the size because it sucks like that. Doesn't really matter. We can still scale this back down to 0.2, 0.2, 0.2 as we need it. But I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do this with a static mesh. If you wanted to take and create this as an actual thing, then you can actually, let me show you a different way of doing it. I'm actually going to delete that. And let's go in here with a geometry, and we're going to grab a box geometry. And I'm going to scale this down in the X to 100, the Y to 20, and Z to 20. There we have a board. That's awesome, right? Now there's no texture on it whatsoever. No big deal. We're not worried about that. So if we wanted to now, we can actually take that box brush and with a geometry, you can scroll down and, I don't see anything, but inside your brush settings, create static mesh, and now I can come over here and we're going to call this our box gun, but I'm going to come over here and I'm going to call this SM for static mesh, create, and now it's already changed itself in the map, but I'm going to go ahead and drag in that so you can see it retained its settings and it's there. If you wanted to convert this into a skeletal mesh, there is a way you can do that as well. You can actually come in here and you can right click on it and asset locations, and you're going to want to export. Now when you export it, then I'm just going to leave the default location because I'm not going to really save this project anyway, but I'm going to save it. Instead of SM, I'm going to change that M to a K and say that it's a skeletal mesh box. And it doesn't really make all that much difference on here. So now I can actually import, and it's going to grab from that same folder, and now I'm going to import that skeletal mesh box gun, and I want to tell it to be a skeletal mesh. I'm not going to assign anything else to it, and then I'm going to select import. And what it did just then is, we're going to compile our shaders, but it just created a skeletal mesh out of it, and now we have a skeletal mesh, we have a physics asset, a skeleton, and then we have our original static mesh, and it created a default material for it as well. So we've just created our own sample, and I'm going to grab again the skeletal mesh. We don't need it. Now if we wanted to, we can bring in a skeletal mesh in, and see, there we go. And we're going to use that box gun as our sample gun. And if I wanted to do the same thing for Let's say come in here and do another geometry, and let's do a cylinder. I know it's huge. We're going to change the dimensions for it, and we want to change the Z to 100, outer radius of 20, and number of sides is 8. That's fine. Let's actually change the Z to 150. Outer radius 12, make it skinnier. And so now we can actually take that and rotate it 90 degrees, and if we want to, we can then do the same thing we just did. We're going to convert that by selecting it, creating static mesh. And why the hell am I going through all of this? Well, I'm creating, we're going to call this cylinder gun, and we're going to do SM underscore. So we're just creating 2 samples that we can use for a gun temporarily. I have tons. I have lots of assets that I can pull in here, but again, I'm wanting to do this in a way that it's free for everybody. There's nothing that you have to pay for to download or anything else. Alright, so there we've got our cylinder gun, and again, we can right click on it, asset actions, export, and again, since I'm doing this for converting, I'm going to save it as a skeletal mesh. Save, export, import, cylinder gun. I'm re-importing it, telling it to be a skeletal mesh. One thing I want to do though is, screw you, don't ask me, don't do that. I want to create a new folder because I want to make sure these don't screw up. They will screw up. So I'm going to call this box gun, and I'm going to grab all of the stuff related to the box gun, and I'm going to dump it into that folder. Because what will happen is if we go to try to re-import that, it's going to try to use that other skeleton, and trust me, it's just going to be stupid. You're saving yourself an issue by not doing it that way. So again, we could actually go ahead and create a new folder, cylinder gun, and I'm going to move that in here. We're almost ready to get into the rest of this. So now we can go ahead and do import cylinder gun, open, make it a skeletal mesh, import, and close that. So we're all good to go. We have everything we need. And cancel that because I don't want to save the map just yet, because I'm not worried about the map. So what we want to do is we want to give our character a gun, and we want to be able to switch our gun back and forth. So we have our 2 temporary guns, and that'll work. So there's a bunch of different ways of doing it. You can add the mesh to our character, and he'll be holding on to it. I'm just going to put it in his hand, whatever, and just kind of let it be that. So you got to have a socket for your weapon to go onto. So let's actually go into our mannequin character mesh folder. We want it to go into his hand. So I'm going to select the hand R, or you can come over here and manually select it, and we want to add a socket, main hand. You can call it whatever you want, just remember what you call it. So we want to make sure that we're putting it in his hand correctly. We're not really worried about the animations all that much because we don't really have any that we've added in, but to make sure it looks right in the animation, come over here to animation, preview controller, use specific animation, and then select an animation. And this one I just want to select the idle, which is third person idle, and I'm going to hit pause, and I'm going to drag it back to the first frame. Now we want to add a preview asset by right clicking on our main hand, add preview asset, and we want to let him have the skeletal mesh for the box gun. Now here's where you're going to run into a little bit of a problem here and there. Is I'm not worried about it for right now, but what will happen is some things are not going to sit perfectly the same. If I say use your MP5 or use your M4 or use your AK, they may have different handhold positions, so it may be something to look into if you want to do that and have them all correct is create a socket called AK grip or whatever. Create a new socket for each weapon, and that way you can line them up perfectly. I'm just going to create this one, and this one's going to be good enough for our purposes, so it's just going to sit right there. I'm not really worried about setting it up perfectly because, well, this is not a perfect thing. This is just a sample. So it's going to place it right there. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to close the skeleton down. Now we have a socket for it to go to. So now we can actually go back to our blueprint for our third-person character. Now, you guys have to take into account, do you want him to pick up the weapon off the ground, or do you want them to already have a weapon? And there's two trains of thought on that. If your player should always have a weapon, then we can do it one way. If you want the player to pick up the weapon, then we have to do it another way. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize some of this other stuff here to not complicate things. And I'm going to create a map folder because it's going to bug me to not have one. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save all and save this map as our test map. Doesn't matter. So, kind of waiting on you guys to say pickup or already had one. Alright, so pickup. So to have a pickup weapon, I'm sure you guys know that for doing this, you're going to have to create a blueprint actor for each weapon. So I'm going to go ahead and in my assets folder, and to keep it simple, I'm just going to put it in the box gun and the cylinder gun folder. I'm going to right click, create a new blueprint class, and we're going to call this an actor, and we're going to call this our box gun. But so we know it's a blueprint, we're going to say BP underscore box gun. Now if we go into that, then what we need to actually do here is now we have a static mesh and we have a skeletal mesh of our weapon. That's always preferable whenever possible. So we're going to add a component, and we're going to tell it to, well, before we add a component, let's actually come in here, and I'm going to close my third-person character. We are going to have the primary being a static mesh, and we can assign both of them in the same, but I'm going to start off with the... First of all, let's go in here and let's go ahead and tell it to use the... You got default material, but we're going to change the names of them. So you got like cylinder gun here and box gun if you look at the description on the mouse over. So we're going to save that. So now we actually have that. We don't want a collision on this weapon. But how are you going to pick it up? Well, you don't want to... I promise. So we're on the static mesh. Now if we come into our box gun, click on add component, the static mesh is already selected, so whenever I do that, there it is. So we have a static mesh, but what you're going to see is it's sticking through the ground a little bit, so you can actually raise it up. If you want to make it really cool, then to make it to where you can pick it up, click off of it so you don't have anything selected, or you have the root selected, add component, and we want a box collision. We want to add our own collision to it. So with that box collision selected, let's go ahead and scale our box collision to be close to the size of what we're working with a little bit of overlap. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take both of these, and I'm going to move them up a little bit because it's a pickup. And we want to make it awesome so that we can tell that this is a pickup. And we need to go ahead and add another component in. We're going to add a rotating movement just because we want this to be sexy. We hit compile and save. And now we take our box gun and we're going to throw it into the map. Now when we hit play, we can see there it is. And it's rotating. It has no collision, and we can walk over it. So if we want to, we can pick it up. You can raise it as high as you want to in the blueprint, and it'll snap to the ground properly and be as high as you need it to be without going into the map and raising it up and down. So we want to make it to where now we run over it and pick it up. But let's go ahead and do the same thing that we did for the cylinder gun. I'm going to go ahead and create a new, not a new folder because I'm being stupid. Delete that. I want to create a new blueprint actor class. And we're going to call this BP underscore cylinder gun. We're going to open it up, and we don't need anything from you just yet. So we're going to go ahead and select the static mesh. Let's go ahead and give it its material. Save and close. We don't need a collision on it, so we got it selected. We're going to go ahead and add component, static mesh, and again I'm going to raise it up a little bit. I'm going to add in a box collision. And this is relatively easy when you're doing your pickups. So I want to go ahead and get it to where it overlaps our thing. That is lovely. And now we go ahead and add our rotating movement. And compile and save. Now we can go ahead and throw that in there, and we can see that when we go into play, we have two rotating weapons, and now we need to set them to where we can pick them up. But here's where the fun part is we need to be able to pick up this one and this one, but we can only use one. Okay, that should be fun, right? You know, if we select it to where we can carry both of them, let's do it that way, where we can select between number 1 and number 2. Number 1 will be the box, number 2 will be the cylinder gun. So now we can switch between weapons and do weapon switching. Changing. Awesome, right? Okay, so without further ado, we're going to go back to our box gun, and we need to pick it up and add this to our inventory. So we need to know that we have picked it up. We have picked it up. So in my third person character, there's a couple different ways we can do this. Well, let's actually take a look at something. If you're not familiar with something called an enumerator, what the hell is enumeration? Create that, and I'm just going to call it guns, and I'm going to go into it, and there's nothing here. Okay, so I hit new, and what it is a name. Box gun. Don't really need a description, but let's go ahead and add another new one, and this is going to be a cylinder gun. And there you go. That's one way you can use an enumerator, saying, okay, these are just names, and I'm going to save that, and I'm going to close it. I'm going to go ahead and rename it. The easiest way to rename it is to left click on it, hit F2, and I'm just going to do enum. So it's a guns enum, but what else can we do? We have a structure. Okay, guns struct, go into that, and aha, this is letting us set up a variable type. Enumerators or enums are names, saved name variables, where you can have multiple things in there. You could have 2, or you could have 2,000 in there, and have hey, welcome Clutter, I didn't see you pop in there. So yeah, let's use save variable names that you can call back later. So now on this one right here, we can actually say, okay, well, we got this, and we're going to call this part of it is like well, it's a variable, and we're going to call this our primary weapon. Okay, and it is going to be a, well, we need to give it a type. Thank you for the sub there, bud. Yusef. We want this to be a skeletal mesh. So we're going to come down here and an object reference. Now, this, we're not going to set up a default just yet because we don't want a default. Being that we've just created a primary weapon skeletal mesh, now this is actually callable anywhere we need it. It's editable, and there's no tooltip on it. That's fine. So now if we hit that, we have a primary weapon. If we wanted to add in a new variable now called secondary weapon, so if we wanted to add pistols that we could swap around, then now we have the ability to do a primary weapon and secondary weapon, and we can set it with other variables. It'll become more clear here in just a second. So I'm going to save that, and now let's go back into our player character, or our third-person character. Now, we don't see these here, but what about, well, you just type in guns, and I can see our struct and our enum. So you have a switch here, switch on guns enum. You could also set numbers, members in the guns struct. So what can we do with that data? We need to, well, if we did break guns, you can see primary weapon, secondary weapon. We don't really need that one right now. We need to actually have a method of knowing that we have picked up the box gun or the cylinder gun. So we need to actually say a name for them or whatever. So we need to create a variable, and we actually have guns struct, and we need to have a variable for that. So let's actually create a variable, and this new variable is going to be called our guns enum. And if we come over here to our variable type, type in guns, and now we can select guns enum. You can see it changed the color there. And now I'm going to hit compile and save. And now we can see we have box gun or cylinder gun. We have our two options right there. So default value is box gun. We could actually go into our enum and create another one and call it none, and that will give us a third option, but we'll work with this for right now. So now we have our guns enum. I can just drag this in as a regular, and then if I need to, I can pull that off of there, and well, it's already a variable, but we have that. We're going to use that in a minute. Be patient, young Jedi. Alright, so even though I didn't save anything, it's wanting me to compile and save, but our guns enum. Well, let's create another variable, and we're going to call this our guns struct. Call them whatever you want from there, but what I want to do is type in guns and struct, and you can see it's blue. So I'm going to hit compile and save. So they have different colors now. You open that up, and you can see there's your skeletal mesh references. Alright, so there is nothing attached to them, so we can actually come in here and pull this, get a reference to it, and then if you wanted to, you can drag out from there, break guns struct, and here's your primary weapon, and you could do a set skeletal mesh, and there you're calling reference to your mesh, and that's not the one you want, because that's referring to your actual body, and you don't want to mess with that. So your actual target is the new mesh, what you're creating from. You're gonna have to break this down a little bit farther, but you can actually set the skeletal mesh as that. We're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to grab our enum. If you did a set node, then what you've got here is you're setting, well, what am I setting? I'm setting the box gun to this. Drag that out, and you have different things you can do with it. Well, if you try to do set skeletal mesh, you can't. So, what can we do with it? Well, what if we grabbed our set node for this, well, that's not really going to work the way we want to. But we do have this. We could actually change that to where we call it our primary weapon, so we know what we're working with here. So you can see it changed it right here as well. Primary weapon is this. Alright, so let's get back to the basics and actually go back to actually picking them up. So when we have another variable here, we're going to start off with box gun PU. And we'll go ahead and leave that as a Boolean because we're asking a question: did we pick it up or not? And we want to do the same thing for cylinder gun PU. And you can put a question mark at the end of it if you want. That way you're asking a question here. Has it been picked up? So we can go ahead and compile and save. And now we have an overlap event we can create. So it's going to tell our player character that we have picked up this one right here. So what we'll do is we'll go to our box gun, and I'm just going to get rid of everything in here just so we can start clean. So we're going to grab our box, and I'm going to right click on our box collision, add event, on component begin overlap. Then from there we need to come from other actor and cast to player. No, sorry, we want to cast to, I'm used to doing player underscore base for my character, so habits. So we want to cast to our third person character. You can see it automatically connected our executable node. So we're only referencing when the third person character actually overlaps this box. When that person actually overlaps that box, then what we want to do is, since this is the box gun, we want to box, well, there we go, set box gun picked up to true. So now it's telling the player character that you have picked up that weapon. Good enough, right? Compile and save, but we want to actually get rid of the gun off the map. So let's actually come in here out at the end and destroy actor. Now, we're not destroying the third person character, we're destroying the actor, and it's going to automatically reference to self, which is going to be the box gun. So if we hit compile and save and just quickly test in here, if we come in here and walk over that, it just picked it up and deleted it from the map. We haven't done that for this one yet, so we're good to go. So we can actually take this same information right here. We'll do it manually. So we're going to close this off, go back to our cylinder gun, and we want to go ahead and, again, I want to delete everything. Left click on our box for our box collision, mouse over to on component begin overlap. From there we want to cast to third person character, and we want to cylinder, so we want to set cylinder gun picked up, connect our executable, put a check in the box and say yes, and then we want to destroy actor. We're not worried about doing fancy sounds and junk like that just yet, so this is just an example on how to switch them once you've picked them up. So okay, we got that one and we got that one. So what we want to do now is actually get into all this. Is just prep to get up to the point where we are now. So now we're going to do this off of event tick. So let's go ahead and get an event tick. Okay, so we see that we have our box gun and our cylinder gun, and we want to actually put this in our hands. So We have that enum. We might actually pull that in here in just a minute, but let's go ahead and get our reference to our box gun. Event tick essentially runs every second. It's going to ask this question. Every second as you're going through the actual, you're playing the game, it's going to send this question out to everything that's under the event tick. It's going to run that script again. It's going to check if they're valid or not. So it's not always the best way to do an event tick system, because it's going to be doing a constant query or question every second. So the more you put in there, it's actually going to start, binding things together, and it may slow your computer down if you have too much off your event tick. Some is not bad. A lot will start slowing things down. Alright, so this is an old school method of doing things, and we can evolve this into something better later. We're going to create two new variables, and we're going to do box gun owned. This is totally not necessary, but we just want to show a little bit of overkill here. Cylinder gun owned. You're wanting to, and actually I don't really want to do that, because I don't want to confuse too many people with unnecessary things, because you're doing the same thing by having the have you picked it up? Yes. Box gun picked up. We're going to run a branch node, and we're asking the question, did you pick up that? Okay, so if so, then we want to then try to set our primary weapon to box gun. Okay, we're almost there. We're getting there. So now let's actually create another branch node, and we're going to run it off of the false node. So let's actually grab the cylinder gun picked up. We're using a get. So we're just asking, have they been picked up right now? If so, then we need to set primary weapon to cylinder gun, and off of the false node, we don't want to do jack shit, so we're going to leave that alone. So we're setting these two. Alright, so now we can actually do this a little bit different way. Yeah, you need to, there is no other way around that. Is whatever you have 100 different guns in your game, then you're going to have a basic variable system to say that this item was picked up, and letting it save to either your player character, your save game, or save into another area somewhere where you're telling your character has picked up this item. You can't use something you haven't picked up. Yeah, the solution is collapsing it down into smaller compartments so you don't see as much at one time. Now we could also do things in custom events to help kind of streamline that as well. So if we wanted to create a custom event, then we can actually take this and create custom event, weapon picked up. So we can actually take all this stuff and put this under that, and we're going to just go ahead and move that down over to here and connect it off with a custom event and break this link. So now we've put this under a custom event. Now you can actually come over here and let's go ahead and compile and save and do a call function of our custom event that we just created right here. So this we can actually stick wherever we want to. We can hide it, we can collapse it, we can actually take the same information here, and let's collapse the node, and we'll just call this our weapon pu junk, and it takes up a hell of a lot less space. If you need to edit any of that, you can just double click on it and go right into it, and there you go. There's no output to it because you don't really need one. So we can go back to our event graph, and now this takes up a hell of a lot less space, and you can just shove it into somewhere like that just to get it out of the way. So now it's going to ask on our pickups. Now what we want to do is, now that we detect that we've picked it up, we want to go ahead and put a weapon in our hands. So let's create another custom event, and let's actually do it as a key binding. And let's do keyboard, type in the word keyboard, and then you can scroll up and actually find what you want it to do. And I'm going to use the number 1 key, and they're on pressed. What we want to do is we want to see if we have that particular weapon. And so what we need to do is we want to set the box gun to be number 1. So what we need to do is do a branch node. We need to get reference to box gun picked up, and on pressed. So what we're going to do is we're going to verify that we want weapon number 1, which is our box gun. Now you can do this other ways. You can actually say primary weapon, secondary weapon, pistol, whatever. You can call it whatever you want and assign it however you want. This is just going to be whenever I hit the number 1 key, I want the box gun, if I have it. If I hit the number 2 key, then I want to go ahead and, you know, equip the cylinder gun if I have it. Alright, so we can do this is set. See, what we did here in the weapons pickup is we're setting our primary weapon. So that's not going to be as helpful for right now. We just need to know that it was picked up, and it's going to check that variable, box gun picked up. Okay, so here we're confirming whether or not we picked it up or not, and here's where we need to actually create a primary weapon. So we need to add a component, a skeletal mesh, and we're going to call this primary weapon. I didn't spell it correctly, but all right. Because we already have that, let's go ahead and PW enum, just so we have something a little bit different right here. So we're going to take our primary weapon, and we're actually going to call it primary weapon and actually spell it correctly. We have no skeletal mesh to it whatsoever, which is fine. We don't want one just yet. So what we need to do now is, when I hit the number 1 key, it's going to ask, do we have box gun 1 picked up? If so, then what we want to do is, let's go ahead and grab a reference to our primary weapon, and then we want to set skeletal mesh, connect it off with a true, and we want to set our skeletal mesh to be the box gun. So if we hit compile and save, and we go into our map, and we hit the number 1 key, we don't have it. But we haven't told it to attach anywhere just yet. So let's actually go ahead and say that primary weapon, we need to move it up on top of our mesh so that it becomes part of our mesh. So now we click it right there, go to our parent socket, and we're going to tell it to go to the main hand, compile and save. Now as we're here, you can see I'm hitting the number 1 key, it's doing nothing. You can see me hitting the key, right? Okay, so I'm going to pick up the cylinder gun. Nothing yet. Okay, so I'm going to pick up the box gun, and there we go. Now it's not in the right place, but that's something that's easy to let's see here. And I'll show you a way of getting rid of that gun here in just a second. So let's actually, we'll look at it. Primary weapon. It's off of the main hand. It is totally in the wrong place. But whatever. If you want them to stop moving, click here and uncheck real time. And let's go ahead and just move it over to here. Compile and save, and we can go ahead and turn real time back on. And let's hit play one more time. We got both of our weapons. We hit the number 2 key, nothing yet. Number 1 key. We have, well, we're just really happy to see you. That doesn't look right. Yeah, if you're doing weapons, it's all going to work out a lot better. I'm just using temporary placeholders. So, yeah, just because that looks a little bit perverse, I'm going to go ahead and rotate it around and just do something odd with it. Alright, so how do we get rid of the gun to show the other gun? So, there we go. It's just going to throw an object out there. We don't care about how it looks for right now. I'm not worried about having guns in this. So we want to hit number 2. We want to switch to the other gun. Or, you know, if we hit 1 again, we might even want to put this one away. So let's take a look at what we've got here. And let's go to our event graph. So when I hit number 1 the first time, you know, if we want to have it on a flip-flop, we can actually take this and move it back. And on pressed, we can add in a flip-flop. Here's where it's going to be a problem, and I'm going to come back to this in just a minute. The fact that we are trying to now not see this. We're going to come back. Actually, we'll come to that part here in just a minute. Let's keep it simple and stay focused on what we're doing here. So we hit the number 1 key. It's going to set the skeletal mesh to the box gun. So we want to do the same thing here, and we can actually Control C and Control V, and then you click on it right here, and then you come back up here to your input key, and you can come back to keyboard, scroll down, and we're going to put that on number 2. We're going to change that to cylinder gun, and we want to get rid of the box gun reference there. Get our cylinder gun, drag it to right there, and now it's going to check to see if we have the cylinder gun. It was kind of a quick and easy and cheesy way of dropping that in there. So now we go in here, hit play, I hit number 1, nothing happens. Number 2, nothing happens, because it needs to check to see if we have them or not. If I grab the box gun and I select it, then there it is. Now I have both, and you see I just changed it by hitting the keys. I can change the skeletal mesh to the box gun by hitting 1, or to the cylinder gun by hitting number 2. So now that is just that easy for setting your skeletal mesh. But we need to have a none. So if we hit the number 3 key, we want to set no skeletal mesh or make all of them go away. So how the hell are we going to do that? So I'm going to grab this, Control C, and for right now we're going to use the number 3 key as a show nothing. Then we'll look at another way of doing that. So what we've done here is we're changing skeletal meshes. And what if we grabbed a reference to our primary weapon and actually tried changing to set visibility. If I set visibility to not visible, then it's going to make that disappear. Well, is that going to work? Well, there's only one way to find out. Let's go ahead and grab everything here. Hit the 1 key, the 2 key. You can see these are working just fine. Hit the 3 key and sets the visibility to off. But what if we want to hit the number 1 key again and go back to our primary weapon, or 1 or 2? It's not showing anything. So we have this set visibility thing in here. So why not, let's go ahead and take a look at the idea of what we were doing here just a moment ago. Let's actually ensure that we can see this. So I'm going to Control C and Control V, Control V. I'm going to paste 2 of these over here, and I am going to put it right there. Now, we need to grab a reference to our primary weapon, to the self node, and we want to check mark in our new visibility, and let's compile and save. So this should force it to set the visibility to true. So now what happens is we go in here, play our game. First off, we don't have anything. Hitting 1, 2, and 3, nothing changes. Okay, I got both of my weapons now. I hit the number 1 key, there it is. Number 2 key, there it is. Number 3 key, there they go. Number 1 key, it comes back. Number 2 key, it changes to that. Now we could also set it up to where we can do a toggle. And this is perfectly changing everything, cycling between them. And why don't I destroy actor? Because I'm not destroying the actor. I don't have to. I'm just setting it to not visible. So let's actually come in here, and I'm going to create a little bit of space here on these. I'm going to bring this down to here. And on our number 1, what I want to do is I'm going to drag it over, and I'm going to go ahead and add that flip-flop back in. Flip-flop, and I have to do this, I'm required by law to say this, is not just a stylish shoe, but is also a method of cycling rapidly between things. Now that I got the bad joke out of the way, we can continue with the flip-flop. So, we can do this, we can move this over here. You don't need to destroy it, you own it, right? What happens if later you decide you're just going to throw the gun on the ground and you don't want it anymore? Then you can say, you can just set the box gun picked up to false. So you no longer have it. You don't have to. You're just hiding it. Unless you actually get rid of it, and by throwing it on the ground or whatever, you still own it. So you don't have to do anything. You're just setting visibility. So I'm just going to grab the that set visibility that we did here, Control C and Control V, and I am going to come off of the B. So now what happens is when we hit the key the first time, it's going to make sure that it's visible, and then when we hit it again, it's going to set it back to not visible. Compile and save. And we got to make sure we connect primary weapon to that. Compile and save. And then we can do the same thing here. We can drag this guy over. And let's come off of our pressed and do flip flop. We're going to put that there. We want to move our number 3 key down. We don't really even need this number 3 key anymore. This was just to showcase how we can actually just make them vanish. I'm not going to get rid of it just yet, but now we got our set visibility. And what I did with this was I moved this guy over here and this guy over here, just trying to make things neat. And then we copy in our set visibility. Going to connect that. We're going to connect the B link to there. And I'm just going to neaten things up a little bit. Just because I have so many OCDs that it's just absolutely crazy. Alright, so uncheck that. So what we're doing here is we're telling it to cycle our visibility back and forth and cycle our skeletal meshes back and forth. And this is the easiest method for doing a weapon switching system because doesn't matter what key we press right now, 1, 2, and 3, we don't own the guns. We don't own the box gun, we don't own the cylinder gun, we don't have anything for 3. So if I come over here and pick up the cylinder gun and I hit the number 1 key, nothing happens. I hit the number 3 key, nothing happens. But I hit number 2, and there we go. I hit number 2 again, and it hides the gun. So I can cycle between showing the visibility of my gun, but now if I hit the number 1 key, I hit it twice. Now I'm in a vicious cycle of yeah. So we can do a couple things to troubleshoot that. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up this one. Now if we hit number 1, number 2, number 3, I hit number 1 again, didn't do anything. But I hit 1 again, and there we go, it works. But if I hit 1 again, now it hides it. Hit number 2, now I have to hit twice to be able to get it. So it's kind of a glitchy system. It's not horrible. We can make it work. But what's happening is it's setting that condition back and forth. We're actually going to go ahead and get rid of number 3. We don't need it at all. It's just confusing things. And hit compile and save. Number 3 does not exist. So now 1 and 2 do nothing. But if I hit number 2 again, because I've already hit the number 2 key, then it's already set that condition. So if I hit number 1, again, it's not going to do anything because we've already preset a condition of turning off visibility. So that's where it's going to be a little bit fun, is we have to tell it to, oh, what the hell, ain't goody. My ignorant next door neighbor decided he's going to start turning his music up because he thinks this is the ghetto, and it is not. Let's see here. How can we fix it to where this is only going to work if we have that box gun picked up? Well, it is working correctly. It's not going to let us show the visibility. So what's happening though is when we hit the number 1 key, and even if we don't have it, it's asking the question, do we have it? No. And then nothing comes off of that branch, so it should be fine. But if we do have it, then we're setting the visibility and everything. It's setting the flip-flop here. So if we hit the key the first time, nothing happens. We hit it the second time, then it's setting the visibility to false. So what we'll probably need to do is actually bring this over here, and we need to go through this same system right here and adding another branch in. So I'm going to add another branch right here, and off of the true leg we're going to go to there, and off of the flip-flop we're going to come to there. So now we need to physically be asking, do we have it? Then do it. So let's connect that there as well. So now it's going to hopefully fix that problem. So I'm going to move this one over here and do the same thing. And I have clear space, holding the B key and then left clicking, and it is creating my branch node for me. I don't have to type anything in. So now link that. It needs to ask that question one way or the other. So if I hit play, I can hit number 1 and number 2, number 1, number 2. I can hit them back and forth and nothing happens. And I come over here and I hit the number 2 key and nothing happens. So that didn't fix the problem. I hit the number 1 key and it did not fix the problem because now it just hid my weapon. But I hit the key again and it spawns it. I get 2 and it just hid my weapon, and now I got to do that. So you see there's a lot of problem solving that you're going to have to go through. Think of Unreal Engine 4 as a super smart, intelligent way of doing things, but it's absolutely stupid at the same time, if that makes any sense. So you have to be very literal with how you tell it to do things. So it's asking, did we pick it up? Yes. And we'll press the number 1 key. It then asks, have we picked it up? If the answer is true, then we can set the visibility. But how do we prevent this from screwing the pooch on this? We haven't even used this event tick or this weapon pickup. We can actually dump that. We're not even using it. That was just showing something new you can play around with. So what are we going to do here? It seems to be working semi-correctly, but how do we prevent this from doing the problem that we have? And again, do you understand what the problem is that we have? I hit nothing. I'm going to walk over and I'm going to pick up the box gun. And now I hit the number 1 key and it cycles it. We didn't automatically pick it up and go right to our hands. So now if I hit the number 2 key, it changes just fine. Hit the 1 key, it disappears. We want it to change to the other gun. But I can cycle back and forth, because what we did was, whenever I just hit the number 2 key, instead of it setting the new skeletal mesh, it's going to nothing. So we're having to double click our button. It's just not working correctly. So we just have to sit there and keep troubleshooting. What are we doing wrong? What do we need to break down and say, okay, this is what needs to happen? By setting the flip-flop in here, we took something that was working and we broke it. We don't want to always have to show that weapon. So there is an easy solution to do. And if we go ahead and Control C here, Control V, and do like we did before, we're actually going to remove this. Okay, we're going to get rid of that branch and that set visibility. So we still have, when we press the key, it's going to ask, do we have it? Then go ahead and set it visible. But like we did before with the number 3 key, let's actually change that to a different key. In this particular case, we're going to use the H key for holster. So if you hit the H key, then bang, it's going to holster your weapon. So what you want to do is now just grab a reference to your primary weapon, and then link up from that, set visibility, leave it unchecked, just connect that to the pressed, and there you go. So you're going to holster your weapon at this point. It's going to set whatever is in this right here to false, and I'm going to compile and save, and let's see if we screwed anything up. I'm hitting the number 1, 2 key, nothing's happening. But if I hit the H key, I'm not going to do it just yet. So let's grab both of our weapons. I hit the 1 key, and that's correct. I hit the 2 key, and that's correct. But if I hit the H key, it holsters my weapon and puts it away. And then I can hit the number 1 key, and nothing happened. Hit the 1 key again, and then it happened. So why do I have to double click each button? We're telling it to set the visibility each time. We're checking to see that we have it. All right, so what are your thoughts? It's when we're trying to hide the weapon that it's actually becoming a problem. If we were to take and break that link to set visibility and set visibility and set visibility, go back to where we were before, and where all it's doing is it's checking to see whether we have it or not. We no longer need our flip-flop node because we've removed that functionality. So let's actually reconnect that back in. So we press 1, it's going to ask, do we have the box gun? If so, then it lets us do that. So we can get rid of our set visibilities. We're going to get rid of our holster button. Go back to the root of it. Right? So if I hit play, hit the 1 key, nothing happens. Hit the 2 key, nothing happens. I pick up the cylinder gun, I hit number 1, nothing happens. Hit number 2, and it works. We just don't have a way of putting it away. So now I can go between 1 and 2, and everything is great. So you're at this point, you're always going to have a thing. But if you want to hit the number 1 key to make the gun go away, setting visibility is fine, but you're going to have to figure out how to integrate it correctly. Do you want to hide your guns or holster your weapons? So like we were doing in that other example where you walk over, you pick up the gun, and it automatically puts it in your hand, or it automatically puts it on your shoulder. They're using the enumerators and structures and all that stuff, but they're not doing a weapons pickup system. You don't just walk over and be able to pick up a weapon and then be able to use it. They have a totally different system, and it's completely more involved than just this. This can be made to work, but this is also set up only in single player, and this doesn't replicate anything. This is not telling the server that I have the box weapon in my hand. It's not setting that in a multiplayer capacity. So that's a whole different ball game. All we're doing is saying, okay, we're changing the weapon back and forth. But when you're dealing with animations as well, is when you have, okay, when I hit the number 1 key, it needs to animate. See, we don't have a way of hiding our weapon right now. We need a way of hiding our weapon and actually setting the skeletal mesh to null of somehow. So all we're doing here is we are setting our skeletal mesh to whatever it is that we're telling it to do. And that's all we're doing, is we're just saying the skeletal mesh. We're not telling it to unset the skeletal mesh. So if number 1 is your rifle, number 2 is your pistol, you want to put your pistol away, then what you have to think of, now you have to say, okay, you're setting this skeletal mesh, and then you have to set up another one. We're not even using the enum or the struct right now. They were just a way of referring to information. So all we're doing right now is this is the core of it. Of we are, if we have that, if we have the box gun, then when we hit the number 1 key, then we're going to set our skeletal mesh. That's all we're doing. If we don't have it, then it's going to do nothing when we hit the number 1 key. So what we have to do is we need to come up with a method of saying primary weapon. We need to make primary weapon have none. So how can we do that? So we're setting our skeletal mesh for primary weapon. So we just come down here and grab reference to our primary weapon and set skeletal mesh. Select asset. There's nothing there. Clears the asset selection. Well, we don't have anything to put there. Right. And that's what I did before of setting visibility. But we need to actually, and that was fine, but, let's look at that again. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to ignore the number 2 gun for right now. And what we need to do is, if we go back over here and we add in our flip-flop, right? So now, when we hit that key the first time, it's going to ask, do we have this weapon? If so, set your skeletal mesh to this. But what we need to do now is come off from here and set a branch node and say, okay, if we hit it again, we need to set our skeletal mesh to something other than this. What are we going to set it to? Because if we just set visibility of it, then we're back where we started from. If we set visibility and we link that off of the true node here and set the visibility to false. So now we compile, we hit save, we go in and hit play. I grab the box gun. Now when I hit the number 1 key, it's there. Hit the number 1 key again, it puts it away. And at that point, if you need to change animations, that's where you would just set your animation instance. That's no problem. So I hit the 1 key again, nothing happens. Well, that's why we ended up having to force setting the visibility. So we did this, Control C and Control V, and put a set visibility node here, and reference to our primary weapon. And now, if we only had the one weapon, then we hit play, come over here, I hit 1, it spawns it, hit 1, it puts it away, hit 1, it spawns it. It's great. It works perfectly. Until we actually pick up another weapon, we hit number 2, that's fine. Hit number 1, it just turns off the weapon completely. Hit number 1 again, and it gives us our weapon. Hit number 2, gives us our weapon. Hit number 1, it takes it away completely. So we'll end up having to do another system of checking whether or not the item is visible. So how do we do that? See what I'm saying is trying to evolve things as we go. This system works. If all we have is just this one primary weapon, this works lovely. But when we add a second weapon in, that's where it starts to complicate things. So just having one gun is no problem. Now also, here's the thing, is you've got primary weapon is the weapon that we're going to put in our hands. But we could also set up holstered or on back weapon. Just create a new skeletal mesh here, and that's where you're going to have to adapt your way of thinking. When you're setting your skeletal mesh, like I said, this right here works perfectly. This works just fine, but since we want to actually holster the weapon when we hit the key again, that's fine. But when we add that same kind of functionality into it and bring this over here, we'll put the flip-flop in. When we start to complicate things by adding a flip-flop mechanism in, okay, and then we grab these two guys, we're going to move them back over here. This is repeating where we were before. So we have our first branch, which is here, and we're going to put another branch right here. So when we come off of this, there we go, come off of this, right there, and then here we have our set skeletal mesh, but we're actually going to go to our set visibility here to false, and then set visibility here to true. So in essence, what we're telling it to do here, looking directly at this, we hit the number 2 key. It's going to ask, do we have the cylinder gun? If it's yes, then we're doing this. Let's do a weapon visible variable. Okay? And we're going to set weapon visible to true. Right? So I'm trying to get you to come up with these kind of solutions and try things to try to resolve these little small insignificant issues. So we're setting this variable. The immortal fork is my idiot neighbor doing? They should make it legal where you can shoot your annoying neighbors. Anyway, so we're setting this variable. So it's setting it that our weapon is visible. So here what we need to do is we can do the same thing and set weapon visible to false. Okay, that's lovely, right? So we'll do the same thing. We'll grab our weapon visible and we'll set that to false. So when we hit it the first time, what I forget to connect? Everything is connected. Oh, the target here? Yeah, okay. So yeah, and I gotta do that for here as well. Yeah, I would have found that out by hitting that compile button. It would have said, hey, stupid, you forgot to do this. So we're setting the visibility state, and we're setting a variable now saying that, okay, when we do it this way, the weapon is visible. When we do it this way, the weapon is not visible. So what we need to do here is we can take this and move that over to here, and we need to bring in another branch. So we're bringing this second branch here off of this true node, and true to here, we want to get weapon visible. Okay, so we're trying to set this one visible. We're trying to prevent it from falsely setting a condition for our variables so that we can actually correctly set the state of our buttons, so to speak. So now we need to ask, when we hit it the first time, well, we should probably do this on this first line. But let's go ahead and we're asking off of this. When we pressed it the second time, so let's actually want to copy this and paste this, and we don't really need it right here. So I'm actually going to put this back to where it was before. So we actually need to put this off of the number 1 the first time we hit it. So what we're asking at this point is the weapon visible. And let's go ahead and, because I want to make things neat. First, do we have it? Yes. Is it visible, or is there a weapon visible? Do we want it off of the yes or off of the no? We're asking, do we have the gun? Yes. Okay, if we have the gun, then is a weapon visible? Then let's take it off of the false node. So if no, the weapon is not visible, then we're going to set this to visible. Let's try it like that. So I'm going to grab this guy and this guy, and I'm going to bring it up here and Control V. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to put it in the same basic location. Grab these guys, move them over a little bit. Grab this, grab it off of the false node. Drag it to here, drag this to here. So, what do you think? Is it going to work or is it not going to work? So, pressing both keys, 1 and 2, even though I know that we don't have either one of these weapons. So now I'm going to grab both weapons. I'm going to hit the 1 key again, and that didn't fix our problem. I can do this all day long and toggle this one on and off. But as soon as I hit the number 1 key to try to bring the other one up, it's not working because we don't have something in the right place on telling it what to do. Remember, we have to be very specific on how we tell everything to do everything. Hit the number 2 key. So let's actually try this. Even though we're there, let's go ahead and go off of the true link. This isn't going to solve the problem, by the way. I'm waiting for you to tell me how to fix it. I know how to fix it, but hit 1 and 2 so we can preemptively create a screwed up scenario. Hit 1 key, nothing happens. Hit the 2 key, nothing happens. Hit the 1 key again, nothing happens. Hit the 2 key, nothing happens. Hit the 1 key and then 1 key. So nothing happens because we're checking the status of a branch node. we got to this. Is there a weapon visible? Yes. So no, this has actually got to be off of the false node. That was correct. Honestly, I'm making this shit up as I go along. I can sit here and just figure it out in a matter of minutes, but I'm wanting to bring you along for the ride of trial by error and trying things that I know that are not going to work, or trying things that I think might work, that might fix the issue. So yeah, this is just trying to figure it out as we go along. What we need to do is we need to ask and find out, or maybe we need to put this branch in front of this one. So do we need to ask if there's a weapon visible before we do anything? Because what we're doing is we're breaking the system and we're troubleshooting it so that we can prevent it from having false readings. I go into the game and I hit play. I walk over here, pick up the box gun, hit the number 1 key, it works just fine. I pick up the other weapon, I hit the number 2 key, nothing happened, but if I hit it again, it then hides it, and then I hit it again. So I've had to hit the button 3 times now to get that to work. And again, and I don't mind deleting all this crap and starting over, because we can do that, delete that, that. This works. Without the flip-flop in here, everything is working just fine. We got rid of the flip-flop, we come back in here again, set it up the way we originally had it, to where the only thing that we're breaking right now is when we're trying to tell it to holster the weapon by hitting the key again. That's how we're actually breaking it. So, do you have any better solutions? We can get rid of all that stuff and put it back to the way we were to begin with. What is your idea? How can we resolve this issue? Like I said, I can come up with a system in a few minutes and actually solve the whole deal. But I want you to come along for the ride and actually... The weapon visible. Okay, so we're checking right here on the weapon boolean. This boolean is being set by the fact that when we walk into the map, if I hit play, I don't have anything right now. I can hit 1 and 2 all day long. But whenever I come in here, I can hit number 1, and that's no problem. Hit number 2, nothing's going to happen. Hit number 1 again, nothing's going to happen. But now that I grab the other one, I hit number 2, and I can switch between my weapons all day long. Now, if you want to hit the number 1 key again and make this weapon go away, we have to undo what we did here. We set our skeletal mesh by doing this. So, how can we resolve this issue? This is a different way of doing it than another way. It could have been, oh, it's a shit pot way of doing it, but you can actually, whenever you pick up that particular weapon, or if you hit the number 1 key, it's going to spawn actor from class and then attach to component, and you do it that way. And then if you hit the key to holster it or change it, you're actually then having to destroy the actor and then redo everything all over again. So if you want to ignore the primary weapon there, and so when you press the number 1 key, you're spawning an actor of class, which was, just for the giggles, we'll start typing it up here, like spawn actor from class. Okay, and this is another way of going about all this. So I spawn actor of class, pick my class here, and we want BP box gun. And what I'll do here is I will actually copy this, and then I'll break that link. And we're going to go ahead and do this. So now we hit the number 1 key. We need to, first off, ask a question. Do we have it? Alright, so we're going to run a branch off of the pressed. It's going to ask, do we own the box, or have we picked up the box gun? If it is true, then we will spawn actor from class. Okay, and then we'll come over here and we need to do a make transform. So we have a location for that. And then from here we need to attach to component. So we can actually put this in our character's hand. And here we need to have a socket name, which is main hand was the name of our socket. We need to snap to target. So, okay, and then we got our parent here. Our parent, our scene component object reference. Well, we need to, let's try calling it, nope, we can't call it reference to self. Attached to component. Well, what are we going to set for our well, we got it off of our target already. We'll come back to that. Usually it would be a mesh reference. But we already have that primary weapon skeletal mesh. Let's look at here. We're going to attach to component, and what we need to really be doing here is we need to create another variable system for this. So we drag off from the return value and promote to variable, and box gun in hand. So let's actually link that in. Here we need to bring that down to here, and we need to skip that. So we've got a variable here for box gun in hand. So what we need to do now is we need to test that. So we're going to grab our box gun, hit number 1, and you can see where it did it, right? Hit the number 1 key again, and it'll just keep spawning them in. So that's not right. BB box gun. You were supposed to remind me of something here. That box gun is referring to this right here. Okay? We need a weapon pickup. So we're going to have to create a new blueprint actor, and it's going to be BP underscore cylinder underscore gun underscore PU. I'm not going to actually populate that one just yet. They only have a static mesh. They don't have a skeletal mesh. And we're telling it to spawn that actor again. So we need to do the same thing here. We need to create a new blueprint class actor. We need BP underscore box underscore gun underscore PU for pickup. And when we go into that, we need to assign that to be the skeletal mesh. Add component, skeletal mesh, no problem. So skeletal mesh, there is no parent socket or anything in here, so we're telling it to spawn this right here. We want to set up that. So now this should be box gun pickup. So now it's going to spawn in a skeletal mesh. See, we've killed this right here. So we need to get rid of that. And let's delete it completely. So from that, we need to go ahead and promote to variable. And do it again. Box gun in hand. We'll connect that to self and to here. That's fine. And so what we don't have here is object reference. Normally it would be mesh, and you want to get that reference to it. To add SK box gun as a skeletal mesh component. We're not going to mess with that right now. So again, we want to snap target, make sure everything is there. Go to our main hand as our socket name. So we need to make sure our transforms are all correct and everything. Hit compile and save. Now if we come over here and pick up our box gun, hit the number 1 key, not a damn thing happened. Oh, it's spawning all right. It's just not visible. If you look at your world outliner, we've just spawned in a bunch of them. We spawned in 10 of them. It's been a while since I actually did these. Or spawn transform. Socket transform mesh. Alright, so yeah, I don't even like messing with it this way. In socket name was main hand. And we don't technically even need these anymore, because we're telling it to go to there. And yeah, I don't even like this method of actually spawning it in. Because now if we come in here, we hit the number 1 key, nothing's happening. Pick up our box, hit number 1 key, and it spawned it, but it didn't stay there, you piece of shit. And every time I hit the key, it's going to spawn a new one at that location. Might come in handy for other things, but yeah, it's not going to be very handy for us for that. I want you to get used to making your own shit without referring back to somebody else's template. They use a totally different method for doing that. Their weapon switching is going to a freaking weapon station and saying, okay, now you can change it. And they're setting a skeletal mesh at that point. You start off with a gun in your hand. You're doing the change skeletal mesh thing that we started off with, because your default weapon was actually a skeletal mesh there. So, transform space. We need to... Well, let's see. Attach to component. Yeah, so this thing is, when you're looking at the way they did things, if you start with a default weapon in your hand, that's one thing. You could actually create another skeletal mesh that basically is invisible. You can hide it inside the player. And if you want to go that route, because, you know, doing this right here, when we spawn it, we need to attach it to the player, then we hit it again, and we need to despawn it. So, you know, this method right here sucks donkey nuts. I hate screwing with that version. We hit this back in here. This works. Compile and save. Because our primary weapon has no default skeletal mesh. Okay? And the default skeletal mesh, we're telling it to change the skeletal mesh. Okay, this primary weapon is socketed to the main hand, and it's creating that. So you can either create something that's really freaking small that doesn't exist. Your primary weapon is your primary weapon. So what we need to do is we're starting with a primary weapon having no skeletal mesh whatsoever. And at this point, we're telling it to, when we press the number 1 key, we're telling it to now give it a skeletal mesh of the box gun. We hit the number 2 key, we're now telling it to have that. Again, I ask you, how can we tell it to have none for the skeletal mesh? You said destroy actor. Well, is that going to work? If I take number 2, drag this off of here, and off of the pressed, do the flip-flop again, because that's how we're going to go back and forth. Destroy actor, I don't see that working, because we need to grab, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to grab these and drag them over. I know we keep sliding it farther and farther to the left as we're going through here, but let's come off from here and destroy actor. Get a reference to primary weapon, which we can't do. So how do we get a reference to that to be the object reference? We can't attach that to there, but we're skeletal mesh, and if we look at it, what actor are we destroying? So we're on the number 2 key, and let's go back into the game here and hit the number 2 key, and we just deleted ourselves. So we knew that's not going to work. So we have to have another object reference for that. So how are we going to do it? We had our enums here, and we get that. If we break our enum or our struct, it's good if you want to destroy our actor and you know, go invisible and never come back, but you know, we have our struct, but that's just going to say 1, 2, or 3. Let's actually go back into our structure. Where the hell did we put it actually? In our blueprints, our guns structure, we have none, none, none. Okay, so let's look at it this way. We're going to change this to box gun, and we're going to change this one to cylinder gun, and then we're going to add a new variable in here. We're going to call it our none gun. We need to make sure it's a skeletal mesh, and object reference. So now we can actually assign this. Box gun is going to be the box gun, and cylinder gun is going to be cylinder gun, and none gun is none. So we have box gun, cylinder gun, none gun. Let's look at our enum here, and just for giggles, we're going to go ahead and throw one in here. We're going to call it our none gun save. Okay, so we have nothing for our description whatsoever. That's fine. So now we have our struct is going to make a reference to all 3 of those skeletal meshes. So if we look at it, you kept saying go back to your gun struct. Okay, so I'm going to hit compile, save. Now if you look at our gun struct, we have 3. We have the box gun, cylinder gun, and none. All right, so let's actually, I'm going to go ahead and delete all of our stuff, and let's start from scratch from where we are before. So we're not worried about our number 2 key. We're going to have that. delete that. So we're looking at when we hit that number 1 key. Well, first off, we do need to have our branch node. We need to get reference to our box gun, and we need to check to see if we have it or not. That's something that has to happen. So after here, then let's go ahead and throw in the flip-flop. All right. So it's going to check to see if we have it or not before it even does anything with this whole scenario. So well, we're starting from scratch. Everything else is done. We're looking at our gun struct, our structure. We have reference to these cylinder, these meshes right here. If we actually grab our gun struct here and do a set, well, we actually need to break it first. Well, let me grab that set, get node. What happens if you hit equal equal? Nothing. So we need to, let's actually do guns, and we need to break guns struct. Now, from there, yeah, we're checking first off to see if we have that gun, and if so, then we can start doing things to say that when we first hit it, then second time we hit it. Okay. But what if you did? You can't set visibility. So you've got your gun struct right here. You can make where you can actually change that. So you're remaking your structure. You can actually say, well, here it is right here. This is our box gun is using our box gun. So if later we wanted to come in and change the skeletal mesh for our weapons, we could do it that way. But how are we going to force it to show the correct one? So we need to, well, gun struct. If we did gun struct, then break, right? But what if we did set skeletal mesh for a primary weapon? I'm just going to grab that and get it out of the way. And, well, we have box gun. There we go. All right? So we have our struct here. When we hit it the first time, we're going to tell it to become visible. We're going to set that skeletal mesh to the box gun skeletal mesh. If we do this, then let's actually grab this, Control C and Control V. So we add a second set skeletal mesh in to none gun. The target is primary weapon, and we come off of there. Right? So that's what we've done here, is we're setting it to have none as our skeletal mesh. Is that going to work? So I'm actually going to grab this. I'm going to Control C and Control V, and I'm going to paste this in here. Connect that up, and I do need to change that one to cylinder gun. Change that one to cylinder gun. So now we're doing the same thing here and here, and we're telling it to set our skeletal meshes to the correct state. We don't have a skeletal mesh for none, right? So what happens now? We hit number 1 key, nothing happens. I'm hitting it a bunch of time on number 2 key. We're going to grab this one, the number 1 key, and there we go. Hit the number 1 key, and where to go? Hit the number 2 key, and there it is. Number 2 key, there it goes. Number 2 key, number 1 key, number 2 key. It just made it go away completely. So there is a small bug, but that is a lot closer to what you're actually looking for, right? Hit the number 1 key twice, and now I'm back to my box. Hit it again, and it's gone away. Hit number 2 key, it spawns my second gun. Hit it again, it goes away. Hit 1, hit 2, hit 1 again, and then 2 again, 1 again, 2 again, 1 again, 2 again. See, we have a cycle. So we're not 100%, but we're a lot closer with a better way of doing it, and we brought in a struct or a structure to be able to solve that issue. So where does the problem lie at this point? How can we double check? Because we've got our branch here. We're asking, do we have it? I mean, if we go in here and I'm going to only pick up the box gun, I'm going to hit number 1, hit it again, it goes away. Hit number 2, I don't have it, so nothing can happen. If I hit number 1 again, it spawns my number 1 gun, hit the number 2 key, and it's doing absolutely nothing, which is what we want. We don't want it to do a thing. I get 1 back and forth, and it toggles that weapon back and forth. Now I have nothing displayed. My skeletal mesh is set to none. I come over here, I pick up the number 2 gun, and now if I hit the number 1 key, it spawns it. Hit the number 1 key again, it despawns it. Hit number 2, it spawns. 2 again, it despawns. Or it takes it out of our hand, not despawns. But if I hit 1, and then I hit 2, then I hit 1 again, I wanted to go back to my number 1 gun. Instead, it just went to none. Because what's happening is it detects the number of times pressed. So we have to have another variable in here, like we were doing before here with the weapon visible. So what if we tried doing that? We set weapon visible, connect that to there, and I'm just going to connect this on all of them. So I'm going to hit Control C, Control V, Control V, and Control V. So here and here, and I'm going to connect them all. Then I'll come back and I'll set the check marks to where we want them to be, because we want to do it in a manner of logic, knowing what we're doing as we're doing it. Now we're going to have to go a step farther past this as well, but we're asking here at this point, we have set the skeletal mesh to an actual weapon mesh, so we're setting it as visible. On the second time we hit it, we're setting it to not visible. So we want our first one to be visible, second one to not be visible. So we're connecting the nothing, the none gun is now being given the Boolean state of weapon not visible, right? You follow the logic of that? So whenever I hit the number 1 key, it's saying the first time, it's asking, do you have the box gun? If the answer is yes, then we want to set the skeletal mesh to the box gun, right? And we want to set visibility to true. We have a weapon visible. Now, same process again. We hit the number 1 key. We need to ask, is there a weapon visible? Doesn't matter if it's this one or this one. Is there a weapon visible? We may actually have to break it down, but I would rather try to do it as a single variable instead of is box gun visible, is cylinder gun visible. I don't want to have to break it down to all of them. So let's try doing it this way. Is a weapon visible? If the answer is yes, then we want it to do this. So we probably need to come off the B side of flip-flop. So I'm going to grab this, drag it off to the side, and I'm going to grab a branch node and I'm going to connect that to the B line. And what do we say we're trying to accomplish here? Is we're asking, is a weapon visible? If the answer is true, then we set this to this, and then set weapon visible to false. So in theory, that should be what we need. So again, that's a simple thing, Jordan. You're setting the ability with that, but the whole thing is it's a system of variables. Can I? You have to ask, can I do that? And then with a branch node, if I can do that, then you perform the animations and you carry off the rest of your stuff. So you're always having to, branch nodes are the way that you communicate with your blueprints and with your whole thing in general is, can I do this? If I can, then what do I do? You have to break it down, and remember, whenever you're setting up a game, you're talking to this game as if it is absolutely stupid. It is a brilliant system, but you gotta ask, do I have this weapon? Have I picked it up? No? Well, then I can't do shit with it. I have picked it up? Then okay, then I want to display it. Let's actually take a look, see what this looks like here. So I'm going to grab both of my guns, and I'm going to hit 1 key. Lovely. Hit 2 key. Lovely. Hit 1 key. Why the hell did you disappear? I didn't want you to disappear. I hit 1 because I wanted this to show up. Now if I hit 2 key, it's reading the second press. I pressed it once, I've pressed it twice. I've said it once, I've said it twice. So the problem is actually saying that I'm toggling. I'm using this flip-flop. So do I even need this flip-flop? Can I do it a different way? Off this branch node, I'm asking, have I picked it up? Okay, yes, I have it. Is there a weapon visible? Well, first off, I didn't link that. You let me not put that there. So we're going to get a reference to weapon visible. We had nothing connected to the branch node there. Let's check that before we start getting drastic here. You guys let me do that. You let me connect nothing to that branch node. I blame all of you. Alright, so I hit 1, I hit 2, I hit 1 again, and just like I thought, it's going to do the same problem. So the second key press is actually doing the second part of it. It's registering that I have pressed the button once, and it's going along this line. It's not resetting on the number 1, number 2. It's not resetting itself. So the flip-flop mechanism, I believe, is what's actually causing this problem. Alright, so if I hit the number 1 key, let's go back to this number 1 key. If I hit the number 1 key, it has to ask, have I picked up the box gun? If I have, then it can carry on to this, right? Well, we're not going to mess with visibility. We've fixed the whole visibility issue by bringing in our structure for our guns and setting our skeletal mesh. What we have to do is we need to physically get rid of the flip-flop, because our flip-flop is what's actually causing our problem right now. So I'm actually going to bring my gun struct over, and the break node for that. Bring this over here. So now we have this. We're asking this question, can we do that? Yes. Okay, we have it. That's fine. However, what's going to happen now is we need to start using this part of it. We need this whole section of, is there a weapon visible? We need to find out if there's a weapon visible. Are we going to have to break it up? We need to be able to utilize this. We need a system of checking. And we're studying our skeletal mesh. That's fine. This works. we need another branch node. We need to ask another question. Is there a weapon visible? So let's actually bring this up here on this true node. Right? And then if there is a weapon visible, we need to actually change that to here and this to here. We're doing a crossover, so we're now getting it that way. It's crossing over, and I hate to cross over, but we're going to do it anyway. So we ask, have we picked it up? Yes. Okay, then we can utilize this portion of it. Is there a weapon present? So it's asking, do we have this? If the answer is true, then let's actually break these. I want to do this correctly. All right, so we need to go through all this. On the true, we have this weapon. So is there a weapon visible? If the answer is yes, then we need to see, you've got me confused here. I had everything working correctly in my head, and then when I go to translate it over here, I need a break. We've been doing this for almost 2 hours, and I could have already had all this done, except for the fact that I'm breaking it down, slowing it down, trying to make it to where it's easier to follow along, and I'm screwing myself up. So we know this works. So when we hit it the first time, we're setting it to that. We had our flip-flop, and it was working correctly. We're running it from here. So can we still use a flip-flop? Maybe yes, maybe no. Because what we got to do is try to avoid it from doing anything. We need to reset back to this. It's not that hard. It's just that after about an hour, 15 minutes of doing this, I usually take a break, walk away, and then come back. And I lose focus, so I have to know my own personal limitations on doing things. So we have to ask that. The flip-flop was causing the problem because we hit it one time and it registered, okay, you've hit it one time. You hit it a second time, okay, it now registers a second time. So we need to have an alternate method of doing that. If I hit the number 1 key and we have the box gun, then we need to make it visible. But only if we... I'm trying to avoid having 100 different variables of weapon visible, because I could easily just go in here and say a new variable of, yeah, I was trying to avoid having to create a variable for each gun. So we come back in here, and I remember earlier I created it and then deleted it. Let's say box gun visible, and we'll do another one, probably spelling it wrong, but I don't care. Cylinder gun visible. So we're going to get rid of these guys. We're not using that, we're not using that, and we're not using that one. So let's try not to confuse things too much. I'm going to get rid of that, get rid of that. This looks like shite because I have just deleted everything. So I want to keep everything symmetrical, clean, and neat. And I'm screwing that up. So here's what we got to do now. Is we've set the skeletal mesh. Alright, so we need to have something to come into here. So we'll look at that here in just a second. We are setting the box gun visible to true. Okay. So now we need to ask that branch node question, is box gun visible? is cylinder gun visible? So what we're going to end up with is, yeah, and that's the thing, is 100 guns, 100 variables. You're going to have probably 200 variables. You're probably going to have 1,000 freaking variables. You're going to have variables for everything. So if you got 2 branch nodes right here, you're going to have to do box gun visible. And okay, remember, hold down the control key, left click, drag it in, and you're going to get your references, your get nodes. So you need to ask, is box gun visible? Is cylinder gun visible? Variables, variables, variables. You're always going to have variables for every damn thing you do, and that's a good thing. So is the box gun visible? True. Then that's always going to revert back to this, because we want to set our skeletal mesh to none if we hit the key again. So we really want the functionality of a flip-flop, but it was causing us issues. So yeah, the flip-flop was a lovely thing. It worked. It just didn't work 100%. What I can do is, I'm going to go ahead and, for now, I'm going to go ahead and let's see here, set box gun visible. I'm actually going to Control C, Control V, uncheck, and do that. I'm actually going to put this back together again. Get rid of those guys. They were just placeholders to explain something. And I'm going to move this over just a little bit. I'm going to put the flip-flop back in for now. So, because we know it's going to work close to what we want. So now we've got our flip-flop back in, and we're doing it that way. Right? We know it works. And let's go ahead and throw in our flip-flop here. You could use switch. You could also, there is another way to do it as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break for a few minutes. I'm going to let you think about it. And we're going to set Control C, Control V. I'm going to let you think about it. I'll give you about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to start the stream back up again and see if you figured it out. I want you to pretty much recreate what you see there. If you need me to, I'll leave the stream up and you can do it, or I can shut the stream down. Whatever, you can pause it, you can come back to this point, do whatever. You can screenshot it now and look at it. I can think if there's another good way of doing this. So press the 1 key and it's going to do that. It's only 8 p.m. for me. So the thought process here is we're using this flip-flop back and forth. We need to set it, and again, I'm going to go ahead and hit play, grab both of my weapons, hit number 1, perfect, hit number 2, perfect, hit number 1, not perfect. It made all of it go away, and I hit number 1 key again. So it is a minor flawed system. It's a minor inconvenience for changing my weapon back and forth, but there's a better way. There's a way we can fix that from having this issue of whenever I hit the number 1 key, it works. Hit number 2 key, it works. Hit number 1 key again, it holsters my gun. Hit the number 2 key, it holsters my gun. Hit number 1 key again, it works fine. Hit number 2 key, it works fine. But if I hit number 1 key, it despawns it. So think about the question that we need to ask, and we'll go from there. Okay? In about 10 minutes, it is 8:02 my time, and I will be back at 8:15 at the latest of my time. So 10-12 minutes. That gives enough time for this to become a part 2. See, I'm trying to engage you guys to think. I don't like just doing videos where I'm saying, okay, do it this way. I don't want you to do a full cookie cutter system. I want you to engage your brain and actually learn one step at a time on how to troubleshoot your own problems. I know of a couple different ways that I can actually go about fixing this, but I just want to have you guys knowing that you're learning as you're going, you're troubleshooting. And troubleshooting skills are 90% of making a damn game, because you're always going to screw something up. Well, it just makes sense. This should work. This should work 110%. What is this? Is a Boolean. Okay. So think about it. Experiment with it. You got about, well, we just wasted another minute. You've got about 10 minutes to figure it out, and then we'll pick back up and we'll go from there. See if you guys can come up with a solution before I do. When we do streams like this, I make shit up as I go along. So, alright guys, I'll be right back in about 10 minutes.